Ilhan Omar entered the Fox News broadcasting studio prepared to label J.D. Vance a bigot before he even uttered a word. The Marine from Ohio observed a congresswoman who had potentially wed her own sibling to secure a green card. She had referred to 9/11s as merely some people doing something and instructed Somalis in Somalia to question her regarding which nation she belonged to. He arrived armed with the marriage licenses she had been concealing for many years. This event was not destined to be a standard debate, but rather a moment of reckoning. Fox News had organized this as a conversation regarding immigration rules and cultural integration in America. But every viewer understood the true subject matter. Grave inquiries had circulated around Ilhan Omar for years, which major news outlets simply declined to examine, waving them away as conspiracies or prejudice. Did she truthfully wed her sibling Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi in 2009 for the purpose of committing immigration fraud and obtaining his legal status? Why did she downplay the most horrific terrorist strike on American territory as nothing more significant than some people performing an action? How precisely did a representative earning $174,000 annually accumulate millions in net worth while directing nearly $3 million of campaign money to her spouse's firm? Why did she disseminate anti-Semitism so repulsive and blatant that the Democratic Party was compelled to denounce her twice through formal House measures? Furthermore, why did she visit Somalia and instruct audiences there to challenge us on what nation we belong to, rather than plainly declaring she was an American official? J.D. Vance had dedicated 3 full weeks to getting ready for this clash, and he had not squandered hours on theoretical policy papers or vague reasoning. He possessed physical marriage records from Hennepin County, Minnesota, demonstrating that Ilhan Omar wed Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi on the 12th of February, 2009. He held academic registration documents acquired from investigators in Mogadishu, which listed both Ilhan Nur Saeed Elmi and Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi with identical parental names. He possessed family pictures that had been uploaded to social media, depicting Omar and Elmi together as youngsters in the same residence before everything was methodically erased once accusations emerged. He possessed screen captures of messages from Omar's own family members identifying Elmi as her sibling in both English and Somali, which were saved before the extensive deletion occurred. He held tax records secured through lawful means, revealing that she filed joint returns with Ahmed Hirsi during years she was legally espoused to Elmi. He possessed official conclusions from the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board documenting infractions. He possessed footage of every contentious remark she had ever uttered. He possessed congressional voting logs, all of it arranged, confirmed, and prepared to project on Fox's enormous monitors. The outcome of a Marine who served in Iraq and respected his vow, confronting an individual who potentially cheated the immigration structure he protected, would reveal the largest concealment in recent legislative history. The Islamophobia shield that had safeguarded Omar for years was not going to function against a veteran bearing documented proof. The Fox News studio was packed with 450 individuals, and the atmosphere was strained from the instant the doors unlocked. Omar's small group of backers sat together, donning hijabs and clutching placards about Islamophobia, appearing rebellious yet clearly ill at ease in deeply unfriendly surroundings. The remainder of the spectators were predominantly pro-Vance, including a substantial quantity of military veterans displaying their service on hats and jerseys, there specifically to observe a fellow Marine ask questions politicians had been too fearful to vocalize. Ilhan Omar entered first, to sparse clapping from her supporters and prolonged loud jeers from everyone else. She wore a vividly colored hijab and a costly-looking suit, carrying herself with the rebellious pride of someone who had survived controversy by labeling it all prejudice. She appeared ready to utilize her standard defense tactic, wherein any critique would be Islamophobia, any proof would be faked, and any query would be racist. She had refined this shield over 5 years in Congress and presumed it would function here just as it had everywhere else. She had disastrously undervalued J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance walked out 30 seconds later to a thunderous applause that persisted for nearly 4 minutes. At 39 years old, with the posture and haircut of the Marine he had been, wearing a plain dark suit, he carried 3 dense binders which he set down beside his seat with a purposeful thud. Everyone heard the sound, and the contrast was instant and sharp. She appeared like a politician ready for victim stories, while he appeared like a prosecutor arriving with evidence. Brett Baer opened with standard phrasing about courteous dialogue and focusing on material issues rather than personal assaults. That ambition would endure for approximately 2 minutes. Congresswoman Omar, your opening statement, please. Omar utilized her rehearsed opening, speaking in that specific accent that her backers found genuine and her detractors found irritating. Thank you, Brett. I am here tonight because certain individuals decline to accept that a black Muslim refugee woman can serve in Congress and represent Americans. The assaults against me are grounded in Islamophobia and racism. They originate from people who cannot accept that someone who resembles me and who believes what I believe can be American. But I will not be silenced. Her supporters clapped enthusiastically, and she sat back appearing satisfied and confident she had created the moral structure that would shield her. Vance looked at her with an expression somewhere between pity and disdain. When he spoke, his voice possessed that slight Appalachian inflection that identified him as authentically from working-class America rather than acting the part. Congresswoman, I am going to discuss evidence tonight, not theories and not speculation, but evidence, documents, records, and your own statements. And I am going to ask you straightforward questions that demand yes or no responses. He opened his first binder, and the studio monitors illuminated with an image that made Omar visibly stiffen. It was a marriage license from Hennepin County, Minnesota, dated February 12, 2009, showing Ilhan Abdullahi Omar married to Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi. Let us begin here. The marriage license occupied every screen in the studio, official and undeniable. Omar's name and Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi's name were bound together in legal matrimony, documented by the state of Minnesota. Vance allowed it to sit there, and the silence was heavy and awkward. You arrived in America as a refugee in 1995. Vance began with a tone that was conversational, yet resolute. You were 12 years old. Somalia was in turmoil with civil war, and your family fled. America took you in when your country could not safeguard you, giving you security, education, and opportunity. Eventually, it gave you citizenship, and even elected you to Congress as one of 435 people selected to represent over 300 million Americans. He paused, allowing that history to establish itself before proceeding. So let us discuss Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, this man you wed in February 2009. Omar's face had turned ashen, for she knew exactly where this was leading and had no effective answers ready because she had never been compelled to actually answer before. You married him on February 12, 2009, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is a matter of public record, yes or no. Omar attempted to deflect into her rehearsed script regarding her personal marital history having been subject to scrutiny. Yes or no, Vance interrupted, his Marine directness slicing through any effort at evasion. Did you marry Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi on February 12, 2009? She could not deny a public marriage record that was displayed on screen for millions to view. Yes, that marriage took place. But thank you. Now let me demonstrate why millions of Americans are convinced Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi is your brother. The screens shifted to display old-school registration records from Somalia, documents that investigators had spent months acquiring and confirming. Vance walked toward the screens to describe what they depicted. These are school records from Mogadishu dating from before you arrived in America. They list students and their parents. Here is Ilhan Noor Saeed Elmi listed as a student, and the parent names are Noor Saeed Elmi and his wife. And here, in the identical records, is Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi listed as a student with the exact same parent names, Noor Saeed Elmi and his wife. He turned to confront Omar directly. Same parents, same household. According to these educational records from Somalia, You and Ahmed Elmi are siblings with the same mother and father. The audience was entirely quiet, and even Omar's supporters appeared troubled, staring at documents they could not easily disregard. Vance produced photographs next, and they appeared on screen, images clearly from decades ago showing a young girl who was unmistakably Omar and a young boy standing together in what appeared to be family settings. They were playing together in family pictures, clearly part of the same household. These are family photos that were uploaded to social media before they were all erased once allegations surfaced. You and Ahmed Elmi appear as children together. Same family, same household. He displayed more proof, screenshots of social media posts that had been archived before deletion. These were posts from people who seemed to be family members, written in both English and Somali, referring to Ahmed Elmi as brother in the context of discussing family. These posts come from your own relatives before everything was scrubbed from the internet. They called him your brother. Your own family members referred to Ahmed Elmi as your brother. Vance walked back toward his seat, but did not sit. He selected another document and stated, "And then there is the name itself, Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi. Your full name is Ilhan Abdullahi Omar, but your middle names when you were born were Nur Saeed. That is your father's name. Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi possesses your father's name as his first and middle names. That is a Somali naming custom where children carry their father's name." He allowed all that evidence to rest for a moment before presenting the theory. Here is what investigators suspect occurred, and you will note everything I am about to describe aligns with the evidence perfectly. Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi came to America, and he needed immigration status and a green card. He was your brother, but he could not obtain status easily on his own. You were already a United States citizen by 2009, so you married him. Brother and sister, you committed immigration fraud to secure a green card for your brother through spousal immigration. The timeline appeared on screen, and Vance narrated it as if he were telling a story about deception rather than reading bullet points. In 2009, you marry him, and he files for permanent resident status as your spouse. From 2009 through 2017, he establishes his status and his life in America using your marriage as his legal foundation. In 2017, once he is completely established and has his green card secure, you divorce him. In 2018, you legally marry Ahmed Hirsi, who you had actually been with all along, and who is the father of your children. Vance produced the most damaging proof yet, tax returns demonstrating joint filing. But here is where it becomes truly fraudulent. During the years you were legally married to Ahmed Elmi from 2009 to 2017, you were also filing joint tax returns with Ahmed Hirsi, a completely different man. You possessed two husbands for tax purposes. That is tax fraud in addition to immigration fraud. He displayed the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board conclusions. Minnesota investigated this, found violations, and fined you $3,469. You paid the penalty. That is an admission that something was incorrect with your tax filings during your marriage to Elmi. Vance walked closer to Omar's seat. She sat motionless, unable to organize an effective defense against documents and records. So I am going to ask you directly on national television, with millions of Americans watching, and with all this evidence displayed for everyone to see. He paused, and the silence was absolute. Is Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi your brother? The question hung in the air, and everyone waited. This was the defining moment. Omar's face flushed. She looked at her handlers off stage, then back at Vance. When she finally spoke, it was not an answer. These disgusting smears are rooted in Islamophobia and racism. They have been investigated and debunked. And that is not an answer. Vance cut her off, his voice hard. I asked a simple yes or no question. Is Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi your brother? I will not dignify, she started. Yes or no? Vance's voice possessed that command tone that Marines acquire. Is he your brother? Omar would not answer. She pivoted to attacking the question as racist. The evidence is fabricated, and the whole line of inquiry as bigotry. Vance allowed her to finish, then delivered his response quietly but firmly. You will not say no. That is what everyone needs to understand. I did not ask a complex policy question. I asked if a specific man is your brother, and you refused to say no. He gestured to the screen still displaying the evidence. If these school records are incorrect, explain how. If these are not your family photos, clarify whose family they depict. If your relatives were lying when they called him brother, tell us why. If his name carrying your father's name is a coincidence, explain that coincidence. Vance walked back to center stage, but you will not explain any of it. You just label everyone who asks questions a racist. You will not deny he is your brother. You will not take a DNA test to prove he is not. You just attack anyone who looks at the evidence. He turned to face her directly for his conclusion. I served in Iraq as a United States Marine. I took an oath to defend this country and its laws. I fought to protect our borders and our immigration system. And you possibly committed immigration fraud, married your own brother to get him a green card, violated federal law, and defrauded the very system that saved you from Somalia, and now you are in the United States Congress. His final line was delivered with quiet intensity. If he is not your brother, prove it. Take a DNA test, show America the results, and release your full immigration records. But you will not because you cannot, and your silence tells us everything we need to know. The audience erupted. Even some of Omar's supporters looked shaken by her refusal to simply deny the accusation. Marriage certificate, school records showing same parents, family photos. She won't deny it, won't take DNA test. Comment fraud if you want investigation. Vance did not give her time to recover or redeploy her victim narrative. He was already removing his next binder, and the screens were changing to display a date everyone recognized. September 11th, 2001. I was 17 years old that day, Vance began quietly, and the room went silent. This was personal. Senior year of high school in Middletown, Ohio, I watched the news like everyone else. I saw the second plane hit live, watched the towers fall, and watched people jump from burning buildings, because staying inside meant burning alive. He paused, and in that pause was the memory that tens of millions of Americans shared. I joined the Marines partly because of that day, because I understood we had been attacked, that Al-Qaeda had declared war on America, that we had to fight back. I went to Iraq, served in a combat zone, and did my part in the war that started because 19 terrorists murdered nearly 3,000 Americans that morning. Vance looked up from his notes and directly at Omar. So let us discuss how you described September 11th. The screen showed Omar at a CARE event in March 2019. She was speaking casually, almost dismissively, about civil liberties and Muslim American rights. Then came the line that would define her callousness forever. CARE was founded after 9/11s because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. Vance replayed just that one phrase. Some people did something. He let it play again. Some people did something. One more time. Some people did something. The repetition made it sound even more callous than the first hearing. Vance produced a list, but he did not read it like a list. He told stories. Gordon Ameth Jr. worked at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 104th floor of the South Tower. He was 32 years old, called his father that morning, and the line went dead. His body was never recovered. He paused before continuing. Edelmiro Abad was a senior vice president at Fiduciary Trust International, 54 years old, father, husband, working in the towers that morning. He is not some people who had something done. He was murdered, killed by terrorists. Vance continued with more names, not in a mechanical list but as individual human tragedies. Marie Rose Abad, 49 years old, Keefe, Bruyette, and Woods. Andrew Anthony Abate, 37 years old, Cantor Fitzgerald. Vincent Abate, 40 years old, Cantor Fitzgerald. He looked up from his list. These are just the first 5 names alphabetically, the first 5 out of 2,977 Americans who were murdered. Not some people who had something done to them. Murdered by Al-Qaeda terrorists who hijacked planes and flew them into buildings full of innocent people. Vance's voice changed from recounting names to something with real anger behind it. 343 New York City firefighters ran into those burning towers. They went up the stairs while everyone else was running down. They knew the buildings might collapse, but they went anyway, and they died, crushed under millions of tons of steel and concrete. These were not some people doing something. These were heroes sacrificing themselves for strangers. He produced photographs from 9/11s. The burning towers, people covered in ash fleeing the collapse captured in sequence. First responders buried in rubble. The images were devastating, and the room was completely silent. I served with Marines who joined because of 9/11s. Guys who saw those towers fall and said, "This is my country under attack and I need to defend it." Some of them did not come home, killed in Iraq and Afghanistan fighting the same kind of terrorism that murdered Americans that day. Vance turned to face Omar. "And you called it some people did something. Like it was a parking violation. Like it was a minor incident. Like the worst terrorist attack on American soil was just something that happened." Omar tried to defend herself, saying that, quote, "has been taken out of context and weaponized." "There is no context that makes that okay." Vance's voice rose to a shout. "No context where calling mass murder some people did something is acceptable. You did not say terrorists, did not say Al-Qaeda, did not say attack or murdered or slaughtered. You said some people did something." He showed clips of her defending the statement when criticized. She had not apologized, had not clarified, just claimed people were twisting her words and attacking her. "You never apologized, never said I should have been clearer or I should have honored the victims better. You just attacked everyone who was offended by your minimization of their tragedy." Vance walked toward center stage, carrying the weight of his military service in his bearing. "America gave you refuge when Somalia was too dangerous, when your country could not protect you. You came here for safety, and then 19 terrorists attacked America, murdered nearly 3,000 people, and you cannot even properly describe what happened. Cannot honor the dead. Cannot call it terrorism." He let that sink in before continuing. "I wore the uniform, fought in the war that came from that day, lost friends who never came home, and you minimize their sacrifice, minimize the attack that started it all, minimize nearly 3,000 murdered Americans as some people did something." Vance returned to his seat and delivered his final assessment, sitting down looking directly at Omar. "That is not just offensive, that is not just insensitive, that is contempt. Contempt for America, contempt for the victims, contempt for everyone who served and sacrificed. You cannot even honor Americans properly when they are murdered by terrorists. That disqualifies you from representing Americans in Congress." The silence that followed was profound. Even Omar's supporters could not find a defense for those words. The evidence was her own voice minimizing mass murder. Nearly 3,000 murdered Americans, called some people did something. She never apologized. Share if you remember where you were that day. Vance moved immediately to his next attack, giving Omar no chance to reset or regain footing. "Let us talk about anti-Semitism because your hatred of Jews is so obvious and so vile that your own party was forced to condemn you, not Republicans, but your own Democrats, twice." The screen displayed House Resolution 183 dated March 7, 2019. Omar tried to interrupt with her standard defense about criticizing Israel not being anti-Semitism, but Vance spoke over her. "This is not about Israel policy. This is about you spreading classic anti-Semitic tropes that have been used to justify violence against Jews for centuries. Let me show everyone exactly what you said." The screens filled with Omar's tweets, and Vance read them aloud like he was quoting someone in a conversation rather than reading a formal list. February 10, 2019. Someone asks you why American politicians support Israel. Your response, quote, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby," end quote, with a money bag emoji. He let that sit for a moment. You are saying Jews buy political support with money, that American politicians only support Israel because Jews pay them to, that Jews control politics with cash. That is textbook anti-Semitism. Jews secretly controlling things with money. That is Nazi propaganda. Congresswoman, Next tweet appeared, and Vance read it with the same deliberate pace. November 16th, 2012, your tweet, quote, "Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel," end quote. Vance looked up from the screen. Hypnotize the world. You are saying Jews have mystical powers to control and hypnotize people to make the world blind to their evil. That is another classic anti-Semitic trope that appears in the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, one of the most anti-Semitic texts ever written. He showed more tweets where she compared Israel to Nazi Germany, where she suggested Jewish Americans had dual loyalty, where she spread conspiracy theories about Jewish influence. This is not criticizing Israeli policy. This is spreading hatred of Jews using the same language and same tropes that have been used to persecute them for centuries. Vance produced the House resolutions and narrated what they meant rather than just displaying them. Your own party was so embarrassed that they did something Congress almost never does. They passed an official resolution specifically because of your statements. H-Res 183, March 2019, the House of Representatives officially condemned anti-Semitism in response to your tweets. He showed the vote count, 407 to 23. 407 votes to 23. Nearly unanimous. Democrats and Republicans together. Your own party leadership, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, all of them voting to condemn what you said. Vance paused before delivering the kicker. And then you did it again. You could not help yourself. Made more anti-Semitic statements, so they had to condemn you again. The second resolution appeared. H-Res 489 from July 2019. Second resolution 4 months after the first one. Your own party had to officially rebuke you twice in 4 months for Jew hatred. When has that ever happened to any member of Congress? He let that question hang unanswered before continuing. You voted against Iron Dome funding. That is the defensive system that protects Israeli civilians from Hamas rockets. You were one of only 9 members to vote no, not voting against offensive weapons or military aid, but voting against defending civilians from terrorist attacks. Vance's voice took on that Marine intensity again. I served with Jewish Marines, some of the bravest people I have ever known. I bled with them, trusted them with my life. And you spread conspiracy theories about Jews controlling the world with money. He walked closer to her seat. You support BDS, boycott, divest, sanction, economic warfare against the only democracy in the Middle East. You compare Israel to apartheid South Africa. You vote against every measure supporting Israel's defense. You side with Hamas and Hezbollah over a democratic ally. The final assessment came with genuine disgust. Your own Democrats condemned you twice, not Republicans who disagree with you. Your own party leadership was so embarrassed by your anti-Semitism, they had to pass official resolutions rebuking you. That is how bad your Jew hatred is. Vance sat back down, having made his point with Democrats' own condemnations. You cannot hide behind criticism of Israel when you are spreading the same anti-Semitic tropes the Nazis used. When your own party condemns you twice, that is not policy disagreement, that is bigotry. Her own party condemned her anti-Semitism twice. Official House resolutions 407 to 23 comment anti-Semitism, if you remember. Vance grabbed his next binder, and the screen displayed a company logo, E Street Group. Let us talk about money, specifically campaign money going to your husband's company. The name appeared on screen, Tim Minot, followed by the company E Street Group, LLC. Then the number that made everyone gasp, $2,800,000. Your husband, Tim Minot, owns E Street Group, a political consulting firm. Since 2018, your campaign has paid his company approximately $2,800,000. Vance let that enormous number sit before continuing. But let us talk about how Tim became your husband, because that story involves an affair, 2 broken marriages, and millions in campaign funds flowing through it all. He produced divorce filings and narrated them like a timeline of scandal. In 2018, Tim Minot is married to Beth Minot, and his company starts working for your campaign. You are married to Ahmed Hirsi at this time. Tim's company gets hired and payments start flowing. The timeline appeared on screen, but Vance told it as a story rather than reading bullet points. August 2019. Beth Minot files for divorce from Tim. In the divorce filing, she makes a specific allegation, quote, "Defendant's more recent travel and long work hours now appear to be more related to his affair with Representative Ilhan Omar," end quote. Vance displayed the genuine legal filing with that specific paragraph emphasized. She is claiming that her spouse was engaging in an affair with you and that his trips for your political campaign were a disguise for their relationship. This assertion exists within formal court records made under penalty of perjury. The sequence of events proceeded further. In October 2019, you divorce Ahmed Hirsi, your third husband. In December, less than 2 months later, you are photographed with Tim Minette. In March 2020, you married Tim Minette. Vance walked towards center stage. So to summarize, Tim worked for your campaign. You started an affair while both married to other people. His wife filed for divorce, citing your affair specifically. You both divorced your spouses. You married each other. And through all of this, your campaign kept paying his company hundreds of thousands of dollars. He produced the payment records and narrated them. Travel services, consulting fees, media production, digital strategy, nearly $3 million total paid to your husband's company. Money from campaign donors, from working Americans giving small dollar donations, going into your husband's pocket. The Minnesota findings appeared on screen. Minnesota Campaign Finance Board investigated, found violations, issued the largest fine ever levied against a sitting House member at that time, $3,469. You paid the penalty. That is an admission something was wrong. Vance's voice shifted to genuine working-class outrage. I grew up in Appalachia. My family struggled with poverty and addiction. We did not have connections or money. We had to work our way up through the Marines and school. You came here as a refugee with nothing, and somehow, now you are wealthy, paying your husband millions in campaign funds, using donor money to enrich your family. He turned to face her directly. The FEC has received multiple complaints alleging you are using campaign funds for personal benefit, that you are funneling donor money to yourself through your husband's company. That is not legal. That is not ethical. That is theft with paperwork. His conclusion came with that Marine directness. You came to America with nothing. America gave you opportunity, and you are using it to steal from working people's campaign donations, to enrich your husband, and to pay your family members. That is not public service. That is corruption. Nearly $3 million to husband's firm while having an affair with him, Minnesota's largest fine. Comment corruption if you see it. Vance produced video footage with visible anticipation. This was going to hurt her badly. August 2022. You visited Somalia, Mogadishu, and spoke to large crowds. Want to see what you told them? The screen showed Omar in Somalia wearing traditional dress, speaking passionately in Somali to an enthusiastic crowd. Subtitles appeared translating her words. Ask us what country we are from. Vance played it again. Ask us what country we are from. One more time. Ask us what country we are from. The repetition made the meaning unmistakable. You told Somalis to ask you what country you are from. Not, I am an American congresswoman representing Minnesota. Not, I serve the United States in Congress. You told them to ask you what country you are from. He paused, then asked the obvious question. So I am asking, what country are you from? Omar tried to give a complex answer about diaspora communities and transnational identity and maintaining cultural connections. Simple question, Vance interrupted. What country are you from? She could not give a simple America answer, kept talking about being part of both worlds and representing Somali Americans and understanding their unique perspective. Cannot say America, Vance observed quietly. Cannot say I am from America or I am American first. Cannot clearly state where your loyalty lies. He produced the oath of office and read it with the gravity of someone who had taken many oaths seriously. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same." He looked up. Allegiance to the United States. Not to Somalia, not to any other country. To America. That is what you swore when you took office. Vance set down the oath document and spoke from personal experience. "I took that oath when I joined the Marines. Meant every word. Was willing to die for it. Served in Iraq combat zone. That is what allegiance to America looks like." He turned to face Omar directly. "You took that same oath, but you go to Somalia, and cannot clearly say you are American. Tell them to ask what country you are from. Promote Somalia's interests in your speeches." The voting record appeared on screen, and Vance narrated her pattern. "You vote against American interests constantly. Against condemning Hamas, against supporting Israel, against sanctions on Iran, against defense measures. You side with countries and groups hostile to America over and over." He walked closer. "I served one country, wore one flag on my uniform, fought for one nation, America." "Who are you serving? Because your Somalia speech, your voting record, your refusal to say America first, all of it raises serious questions." Vance's voice became harder. "I have friends buried at Arlington Cemetery, Marines who died defending America. They knew which country they served. They gave everything for America. And you are in Congress, took the same oath, but you cannot clearly state you put America first." His conclusion was devastating. America saved you from Somalia, gave you everything Somalia could not: safety, education, citizenship, Congress. And you go back to Somalia and will not even clearly say you are American. The final line came quietly, but with absolute finality. "Maybe you are representing the wrong country. Told Somalis ask what country we are from, would not say I am American. Marine who served asks where her loyalty lies. Share this." Vance produced his final prepared evidence before the climax. Video footage from an interview. This is you discussing a college course. Watch what you do when terrorism gets mentioned. The clip played. A professor or interviewer mentioned Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah in the context of discussing how they were characterized in the class. As each name was said, Omar made exaggerated air quotes with her fingers, a mocking expression on her face suggesting the designation of these groups as terrorists was somehow questionable. Vance replayed it twice without commentary. The air quotes were so obvious, so dismissive, they spoke for themselves. "I served in Iraq," Vance began when the clip finished. His voice was quiet but intense. "Fought against the same kind of terrorism that Al-Qaeda represents. Saw what terrorists do up close. Lost friends to IEDs, to ambushes, to suicide bombers. Marines who did not come home because of the same ideology Al-Qaeda spreads." He paused, establishing his credibility on this topic through lived experience, before continuing. "And you make air quotes like Al-Qaeda is not really a terrorist organization, like it is debatable whether they are actually terrorists." The numbers appeared on screen, and Vance recited them from memory. Al-Qaeda murdered 2,977 Americans on September 11th. Hijacked 4 planes, flew them into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon. Tried to hit either the White House or Capitol, only failed because passengers fought back on Flight 93. His voice rose. "Marines I served with were in that war because of what Al-Qaeda did. Some of them are dead because of terrorists. And you make air quotes suggesting they are not really terrorists." He showed the Hezbollah connection. Hezbollah killed 241 United States Marines in Beirut in October 1983. Truck bomb. Marines sleeping in barracks, murdered by terrorists while serving their country. Vance walked toward Omar's seat. "And you make air quotes suggesting Hezbollah is not really a terrorist group." He pulled together the pattern of her statements and votes. "You minimize 9/11s as some people did something. You make air quotes about Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. You vote against anti-terrorism measures. You oppose designating groups as terrorists. You defend countries that sponsor terrorism. The pattern is clear. The question came with Marine intensity. I fought terrorism. You make excuses for it. Simple question. Is Al-Qaeda a terrorist organization? Yes or no? Omar could not give a simple yes, started explaining context and American foreign policy and blowback and complexity. Yes or no? Vance demanded, using that command voice. Is Al-Qaeda a terrorist organization? She kept deflecting, refusing to give a direct answer. Vance let her refusal stand as its own indictment. You cannot even clearly call Al-Qaeda terrorists. Cannot condemn the group that killed nearly 3,000 Americans. Cannot honor the Marines who died fighting them. His conclusion was absolute. I took an oath to defend America against enemies. You took that oath too, but you are not sure who the enemies are. That is not just wrong, that is dangerous. That disqualifies you from national security decisions or representing Americans in any capacity. Marine who fought asks if she thinks Al-Qaeda is terrorist. She won't say yes. Made air quotes about terrorists. Share this disgrace. Vance stood and walked to center stage for this final statement. He left his binders behind. This was going to come from conviction and memory, rather than notes. I want to make something very clear before we end tonight, because I think every American watching needs to understand what we are really talking about here. What this is really about. He paused, gathering his thoughts, or perhaps his emotion. I was 17 when 9/11s happened. Watched those towers fall. Understood America was under attack. Joined the Marines because I wanted to serve the country that gave my family opportunity. That gave us a chance when we were struggling. His voice carried the weight of that service. Went to Iraq combat zone, saw my friends get hurt, saw some not come home. Did my part in defending America against the same terrorism that killed nearly 3,000 people that Tuesday morning. That is what taking the oath seriously looks like. That is what allegiance to America means. He walked a few steps, then turned to face Omar. You came here as a refugee in 1995, 12 years old. Somalia was in chaos, a failed state with violence and starvation. Your family fled, and America took you in. Gave you safety when your country could not protect you. Gave you education, citizenship, opportunity. You became a United States Congresswoman, one of the most powerful positions in American government. Vance let that sink in before continuing. America gave you everything, so let me list how you repaid that gift. What followed was the comprehensive indictment, delivered not as bullet points, but as a narrative of betrayal. You possibly committed immigration fraud by marrying your brother. The evidence is overwhelming. School records showing same parents. Family photos showing you as children together. Relatives calling him brother. His name carrying your father's name. Tax fraud filing with 2 men. You will not deny he is your brother. Will not take a DNA test. Will not answer the simple question. Just call everyone racist for asking. He moved to the next betrayal. You minimized September 11th. Called it, some people did something. The worst terrorist attack on American soil. Nearly 3,000 murdered Americans. I fought in the war that came from that day. You cannot even honor the victims properly. Never apologized, defended your minimization. The third betrayal, you spread anti-Semitism so vile your own Democrats condemned you twice. Official House resolutions 407 to 23. Your own party so embarrassed, they had to officially rebuke you for Jew hatred. Classic anti-Semitic tropes. Jews controlling things with money. Jews hypnotizing the world. Same language Nazis used. Fourth, you paid nearly $3 million to your husband's company. Had an affair with him while both married to others. Got the largest Minnesota campaign finance fine ever. Using donor money to enrich your family. Corruption disguised as consulting. Fifth, you went to Somalia and told them to ask what country you are from. Cannot clearly say you are American. Will not say America first. Promote Somalia's interests. Vote against American interests. Dual loyalty questions that you will not clearly answer. Sixth, you make air quotes about Al-Qaeda. Cannot clearly call them terrorists. The group that murdered nearly 3,000 Americans that Marines like me fought against. You are not sure they are really bad. Vance stopped walking and stood still at center stage looking directly at Omar. We both took oaths to America. To defend the Constitution against all enemies. To bear true faith and allegiance. His voice rose with conviction. I honored that oath, served in combat, was willing to die for America. That is what my oath meant to me. He pointed at her. You broke that oath, possibly defrauded the immigration system, definitely spread anti-Semitism, clearly enriched yourself, obviously showed more loyalty to Somalia than America, certainly minimized terrorism and American victims. The personal element came through now. Marine to Marine values. I have friends at Arlington, Marines who died for this country. They took their oaths seriously, gave everything. And you spit on their sacrifice by being in Congress while possibly being an immigration fraudster, definitely an anti-Semite, clearly corrupt, and obviously more loyal to Somalia than America. Vance walked closer to her seat for his final statement. You came here with nothing. America gave you everything. And you have spent your time attacking America, defrauding America, spreading hate, enriching yourself, and serving Somalia's interests instead of America's. He turned to the cameras and the millions watching. Americans deserve representatives who love this country, who serve it honorably, who keep their oaths. Not someone who possibly committed fraud, definitely spread hatred, clearly got corrupt, and won't say America first. Back to Omar for the final line. I served America, you defrauded it. That is the difference between us. And America deserves better than you. The standing ovation lasted 7 full minutes. USA, USA, USA mixed with Investigate Omar and Lock Her Up. The sound was deafening. Marine veterans in the audience stood at attention, some saluting Vance. Omar sat unable to respond. Every point was backed by evidence. The marriage certificates, the school records, her own words on video, House resolutions, campaign finance records, the Somalia speech. All documented, all undeniable. The Islamophobia defense had failed against a Marine with receipts. The video reached 198 million views within 1 week, becoming one of the most watched political confrontations in American history. But the views were only part of the impact. Within 48 hours of the debate, the FBI faced overwhelming public pressure to investigate the marriage fraud allegations. Republican congressmen demanded answers about why the allegations had never been properly investigated. Conservative media ran detailed segments about the evidence Vance had presented. Even some mainstream outlets had to acknowledge the documents were real and the questions legitimate. The phrase, "Is Ahmed Elmi your brother?" trended for 2 straight weeks. Conservative groups organized DNA test challenge campaigns demanding Omar prove her innocence. The fact that she would not simply deny it or take a test became the story itself, with even neutral observers noting that innocent people usually just say no to such accusations. Her own Democratic Party began distancing themselves with a speed that showed how toxic she had become. Nancy Pelosi refused to defend her when asked. Chuck Schumer gave a statement about every member being responsible for their own past. Committee assignments she had hoped for went to other members. Invitations to party events dried up. Behind the scenes, leadership made clear she was on her own. The military veteran community responded with particular intensity. Veterans groups that normally stayed out of politics organized campaigns demanding her removal from Congress. Marine Corps veteran organizations specifically praised Vance for asking questions others were afraid to voice. The contrast between a Marine who had served and a congresswoman who had possibly defrauded immigration became a rallying point. Muslim Americans were deeply divided. Many condemned Omar, saying she embarrassed their community and did not represent them. Other Muslim members of Congress distanced themselves, with one stating publicly her controversies are hers alone. Some defended her, calling the attacks Islamophobic, but they struggled to explain away the evidence Vance had shown. 6 months after the debate, a moderate Democrat announced a primary challenge to Omar in Minnesota's 5th District. His campaign launch video featured clips of Vance's questioning, particularly the brother marriage allegations and the Somalia speech. His slogan was, "America first, not Somalia first." His first-week fundraising reached $4,200,000 from donors nationwide. Polling in her district showed Omar's support collapsing from 61% to 38%. Her unfavorable ratings spiked to 59%. The combination of possible immigration fraud, anti-Semitism, campaign finance corruption, and questionable loyalty had damaged her even in one of America's most liberal districts. 1 year after the debate, facing certain primary defeat and possible FBI investigation, Omar announced she would not seek re-election to Congress. The statement cited wanting to focus on other ways to serve the community, but everyone understood the real message. Vance had destroyed her politically by asking questions she could not answer and presenting evidence she could not refute. The Marine had done what mainstream media never would. Asked the uncomfortable questions, showed the uncomfortable evidence, demanded uncomfortable answers. And when Omar tried to hide behind accusations of bigotry, his military service gave him armor her typical defenses could not penetrate. This was not a debate between competing political philosophies or policy preferences. This was a confrontation between someone who had served America in combat and someone who had possibly defrauded the system he had defended. Between documented military sacrifice and alleged immigration fraud. Between a Marine's oath and a Congresswoman's betrayal. J.D. Vance had deployed something Omar had never faced before, evidence she could not dismiss, and credibility she could not attack. When she called the marriage fraud allegations racist, he showed marriage certificates and school records. When she tried victim narratives, he showed House resolutions where her own Democrats condemned her. When she attacked his motivations, he pointed to his military service in Iraq. Every defense she had used successfully for years failed against a Marine who had done his homework. The evidence was undeniable. Marriage certificates showing her union to Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi, school records listing both of them with same parents, family photographs showing them as children together, her own relatives calling him brother before mass deletion, tax documents showing joint filing with 2 different men, Minnesota findings documenting violations, House resolutions condemning her anti-Semitism twice, campaign finance records showing millions to her husband, video of her minimizing 9/11s, footage of her telling Somalis to ask what country she is from, her air quotes about Al-Qaeda, all documented, all verified, all impossible to dismiss as conspiracy theories when displayed on screen. But perhaps most damaging was what she could not do, could not simply deny Ahmed Elmi was her brother, could not take a DNA test to prove innocence, could not clearly say she put America first, could not call Al-Qaeda terrorists without hesitation. Her silence and evasion told more than any accusation could. Vance proved that military service gives moral authority that transcends political correctness. That evidence defeats victimhood narratives. That asking hard questions is not bigotry when you have receipts. And that America deserves representatives who love the country enough to defend it in combat, not ones who possibly defrauded it to bring family members. If you think Ilhan Omar should be investigated for immigration fraud, share this story. If you believe a Marine who served in Iraq earned the right to question someone who possibly defrauded the system he defended, comment investigate. Because Vance asked the questions America needed answered, showed the evidence media would not examine, and demanded accountability from someone who had hidden behind accusations of bigotry for too long. The receipts do not lie, and neither do Marines.